Deborah knew something was wrong the moment the woman slapped Yu-jin across the face. The sound cracked through the grand ballroom so sharply that even the violinist stopped playing. Hundreds of wealthy guests turned instantly. Crystal chandeliers glowed over frozen expressions while cameras from entertainment reporters swung toward the chaos like predators smelling blood. "You used me!" the woman screamed, mascara already running down her cheeks. "You promised you loved me!" Yu-jin didn't react. That was the terrifying part. He simply stood there in his black suit, one hand still resting inside his pocket, his expression colder than the marble floor beneath them. The woman's chest rose violently with emotion. "Say something!" she cried. Yu-jin slowly lifted his eyes toward her. "What exactly would you like me to say?" His voice was calm. Too calm. Deborah was standing near the backstage audio controls helping the production crew manage sound equipment for the charity gala, but now her attention was completely locked onto the scene unfolding in front of everyone. The woman laughed bitterly. "You told me you cared about me?" Yu-jin tilted his head slightly. "I said I enjoyed your company. That's the same thing." "No," he replied. "It isn't." The room became painfully uncomfortable. Deborah could actually feel people avoiding eye contact. Nobody wanted to interfere. Nobody wanted to breathe too loudly around him. Because this was Yu-jin, the billionaire every news channel in Korea obsessed over. Young, brilliant, ruthless, the man people called emotionless. The woman pointed a trembling finger at him. "You're incapable of loving anyone." Yu-jin's face didn't change. "If believing that helps you sleep tonight, then believe it." Deborah frowned immediately. Something about the way he spoke irritated her deeply. Not because he sounded angry, because he sounded empty. The woman burst into tears. "You ruined me." Yu-jin reached into his suit calmly and handed her a folded handkerchief. "You ruined yourself when you sold fake engagement stories to reporters." Gasps erupted across the ballroom. The woman's face collapsed instantly. You wanted public pressure," Yu-jin continued quietly. "You thought if the media believed you were pregnant, I would marry you to protect my reputation." Deborah blinked in shock. "Pregnant?" The woman's silence confirmed everything. Yu-jin looked at her with terrifying disappointment. "I warned you never to manipulate me." The woman suddenly looked smaller, broken, embarrassed. But despite the lies, Deborah still hated how cold Yu-jin sounded. No emotion, no mercy, just ice. The woman covered her face and rushed out of the ballroom while reporters chased after her immediately. Then silence swallowed the room. Yu-jin adjusted his cufflinks calmly. "Continue the gala." The orchestra hesitated before slowly resuming music. People began pretending nothing happened, but Deborah couldn't. She stared at Yu-jin from across the room with disbelief burning inside her chest. "How does someone become that cold?" she muttered under her breath. Unfortunately, her microphone was still on. Her voice blasted through every speaker in the ballroom. The music stopped again. Deborah froze. Oh no. Every head turned toward the backstage area instantly. The production manager nearly choked. "Deborah," he whispered harshly. Her stomach dropped violently as silence consumed the ballroom again. And then Yu-jin slowly turned toward her. Their eyes met. Deborah suddenly understood why powerful men feared him. He didn't even look angry. That was worse. His gaze alone felt dangerous. The ballroom held its breath as Yu-jin began walking toward her, one step, then another. His expensive shoes echoed against the marble floor while wealthy guests moved aside instantly to clear his path. Deborah's heart started pounding harder with every second. A Korean assistant beside her whispered nervously, "Don't say another word." Too late for that. Yu-jin stopped directly in front of Deborah. Up close, he looked unreal. Sharp features, dark eyes, calm posture. The kind of face that belonged on magazine covers and warning signs at the same time. He looked at the microphone in her hand, then at her face. You think I'm cold? He asked quietly. Deborah swallowed. Every survival instinct told her to apologize immediately, but something stubborn inside her refused. You embarrassed her publicly, she replied carefully, and she lied publicly. She still looked hurt. Yu-jin's eyes narrowed slightly. So your sympathy depends on tears? Deborah frowned. That's not what I said. Then explain what you said. The tension between them tightened instantly. People nearby watched like they were witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Deborah inhaled slowly. You treated her like she was nothing. Yu-jin stared at her for several long seconds. Then unexpectedly he asked, "What's your name?" She blinked. Deborah. Full name, Deborah Adeyemi. You're not Korean. I'm Nigerian. That single sound somehow carried both curiosity and calculation. Yu-jin glanced briefly at her staff badge. Sound engineer? Yes. How long have you been in Seoul? 3 weeks. And you already judge billionaires? Deborah crossed her arms slightly. I judge behavior. For the first time, something almost resembling amusement flickered in his eyes. Tiny, dangerous. You're either brave, he said softly, or incredibly foolish. Maybe both. Several people nearby looked horrified that she answered him like that. But Yu-jin didn't look offended. If anything, he looked interested. And that unsettled Deborah far more. You know nothing about me, he said quietly. Maybe, she replied, but lonely people always sound the coldest. The atmosphere changed immediately. Yu-jin's expression hardened just slightly. Deborah realized instantly she had touched something sensitive, something real. But before she could process it, Yu-jin stepped aside smoothly. Enjoy the rest of your evening, Deborah Adeyemi. Then he walked away, just like that. The room finally breathed again. Her production manager grabbed her arm aggressively the second Yu-jin disappeared into the crowd. Are you insane? He whispered. Do you know who that man is? Yes. No, you clearly don't understand. Yu-jin destroys people. Deborah looked across the ballroom toward the billionaire surrounded by investors and celebrities. He looked perfectly composed again, untouchable. But something about their conversation lingered heavily in her chest, especially the way his eyes changed when she mentioned loneliness. 3 days later, Deborah was editing audio clips inside the documentary studio when her supervisor entered looking nervous. Deborah, she removed one headphone. Yes? You've been reassigned. Her eyebrows lifted. To what project? The supervisor hesitated awkwardly. Chairman Yu-jin specifically requested you. Deborah nearly laughed. What? He requested you personally for the Hanol Foundation documentary. That makes no sense. I agree. Her stomach tightened immediately. No. The supervisor sighed. You can decline. But they both knew refusing wasn't realistic. This international fellowship opportunity had taken Deborah years to achieve. Working on a billionaire-backed global documentary could change her career permanently. And somehow Yu-jin knew that, which irritated her even more. 2 hours later, Deborah stood outside the executive floor of Hanol Group headquarters trying to calm herself. The building itself felt intimidating. Everything was sleek glass, silence, and power. Employees walked quickly like people terrified of making mistakes. When the assistant opened Yu-jin's office doors, Deborah immediately noticed the massive windows overlooking Seoul's skyline and Yu-jin standing beside them, one hand in his pocket, perfect black suit, cold composure. He turned slowly when she entered. You came. You left me little choice. A faint smile touched his lips. I'm beginning to enjoy your honesty. Deborah remained standing. Why am I here? Yu-jin walked toward his desk calmly. I watched your previous documentary work. You investigated me? I investigate everyone. That's creepy. It's smart. Deborah rolled her eyes softly. Yu-jin noticed. There it is again. What? That expression. What expression? The one that says you're unimpressed by me. She folded her arms. Should I be impressed? Most people spent their entire lives trying to gain Yu-jin's approval. Deborah looked like she barely tolerated him, and strangely, he liked that. Yu-jin leaned lightly against his desk. You're talented, he said. The compliment caught her off guard slightly. Thank you. I need honest people around this project. So you hired the woman who insulted you publicly? You think that was insulting? You looked ready to bury me alive with your eyes. A short laugh escaped him unexpectedly, real this time. Deborah blinked in surprise. Yu-jin noticed immediately. You didn't think I could laugh? I didn't think you had emotions. That smile disappeared just as quickly as it came. There are emotions, he said quietly. I simply don't trust them. The answer lingered heavily in the room. Deborah studied him carefully now, not as a billionaire, as a man. And for the first time, she noticed how exhausted he looked beneath all the perfection. How much sleep do you get? She asked suddenly. Yu-jin looked surprised by the question. That's irrelevant. You avoided answering. And you ask too many questions. Deborah shrugged lightly. Occupational hazard. Silence settled between them for a moment. Then Yu-jin spoke again. Do you know why relationships fail around men like me? Because men like you think money replaces emotional intelligence? That almost made him smile again. Because people stop seeing us as human. Deborah's voice softened slightly. And do you? His eyes met hers. For a second, something vulnerable almost surfaced there, but it vanished instantly behind that familiar coldness. You start filming tomorrow morning, he said. Professional again, guarded again. Deborah nodded slowly. As she turned to leave, Yu-jin's voice stopped her once more. Deborah, she looked back. What? You were wrong about one thing that night. What thing? Yu-jin's expression darkened slightly. I wasn't born cold. And somehow that sentence followed her all the way home. By the second week of filming, Deborah realized two things about Yu-jin. The first was that he barely trusted anyone. The second was that he was slowly becoming addicted to her presence. He never admitted it directly. Men like Yu-jin never did. But Deborah noticed the signs. He started rearranging meetings to match her filming schedule. He stayed longer during interviews whenever she was around. He began asking for her opinion on things that had nothing to do with documentaries. And worst of all, he listened to her. That shocked everybody, especially his executive team. You're changing the foundation presentation because of a sound engineer, one director asked carefully during a meeting. Yu-jin didn't even look up from his tablet. She made a better point than you. The room became awkwardly silent. Deborah nearly laughed. The director looked personally attacked. After the meeting ended, Deborah walked beside Yu-jin through the executive hallway. You enjoy terrifying people, don't you? I enjoy competence. You almost killed that man emotionally. He'll recover. You're unbelievable. And yet, Yu-jin said calmly, you keep staying around me. Deborah rolled her eyes. I'm here because of work. That sound again, like he knew something she didn't. Outside the building, rain poured heavily across Seoul's streets while security opened umbrellas around Yu-jin automatically. One guard stepped toward Deborah with another umbrella, but before she could take it, Yu-jin spoke. She's riding with me. Deborah blinked. What? You heard me? I can go myself. You could, he replied calmly, but you won't. Her eyes narrowed instantly. There's the arrogance again. And there's the part where you still get into the car. Deborah hated how correct he was. 20 minutes later, she sat inside the backseat of Yu-jin's luxury car while rain slid across the tinted windows. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable anymore. That was the dangerous part. Yu-jin loosened his tie slightly and leaned his head back against the seat. You're staring. I'm observing. What's the difference? You look exhausted. I am exhausted. Deborah frowned slightly. You say that so casually. Tiredness becomes normal eventually. No, she replied softly. Pain becomes familiar. That doesn't make it normal. Yu-jin turned toward her slowly. Sometimes Deborah spoke like she could see through skin, straight into the bruises people hid, and he didn't know whether that fascinated him or threatened him. You analyze everyone this way? He asked. Only people pretending they're okay. A faint smile touched his lips. So I'm pretending now? Yes. The driver kept his eyes fixed on the road, pretending not to hear anything. Yu-jin looked out the window quietly before speaking again. When I was 11, he said calmly, my mother married a man for money 3 months after my father died. Deborah's expression softened instantly. Yu-jin rarely volunteered personal information, never according to his staff. She told me something during the wedding dinner, he continued. She said love is temporary, but security lasts forever. Deborah stayed quiet. She taught me marriage is a business deal people romanticize because they fear loneliness. His voice carried no emotion, which somehow made the words sadder. And you believed her, Deborah said gently. I watched her prove it repeatedly. The rain outside intensified. Yu-jin stared ahead quietly. She married 4 times before I turned 20. Deborah's chest tightened. No child should watch that. No child should watch a lot of things. The sentence lingered heavily inside the car. Deborah looked at him differently now, not as the billionaire newspapers feared, but as a boy who learned love through betrayal. You know what I think? She said softly. Yu-jin glanced toward her. I think part of you still wants to believe in love, she continued. You're just terrified of looking stupid for it. For the first time since she met him, Yu-jin looked genuinely affected, like her words slipped past all his defenses before he could stop them. His jaw tightened slightly. You talk too much. Deborah smiled faintly. And you avoid feelings like they're contagious. Yu-jin looked away again. But Deborah noticed something terrifying then. He was no longer emotionally untouched around her, and once emotionally guarded, people begin cracking. They become dangerous. You think loving people destroys them, Deborah whispered. Yu-jin finally looked toward her, and for the first time, she saw pain fully exposed in his eyes. If I had canceled the engagement earlier, he said quietly, she wouldn't have been driving that night. Deborah's heart broke instantly. No, I ruined her life. You don't know that, but I believe it. That sentence explained the entire man. Deborah realized then that Yu-jin wasn't cold because he lacked love. He was cold because he associated love with guilt, loss, punishment. And suddenly she understood why he looked at her so carefully all the time, why he kept pulling close, then retreating, why every emotional moment between them felt like he was fighting himself internally because part of him wanted her, and another part was terrified she would die too. That night, Deborah couldn't sleep. His words replayed endlessly in her head. If I had canceled the engagement earlier. At 2:17 a.m., her phone suddenly vibrated. One message from Yu-jin. I shouldn't have told you. Deborah stared at the screen for several seconds before replying. Why not? 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, his reply came. Because now you'll see me differently. Deborah's chest tightened painfully. She typed slowly. I do see you differently. Another pause. Then, that's exactly what scares me. And without realizing it, Yu-jin had already started falling in love with her. After that night, everything between Deborah and Yu-jin changed. Not suddenly. Worse, slowly, like 2 people trying desperately not to fall while already standing at the edge. Yu-jin became softer around her without realizing it. He started eating meals on time because she forced him to. He slept slightly more. He smiled more often, not publicly, only with her. And Deborah hated how much those small changes affected her emotionally. One evening during filming, she caught him watching her from across the studio. Not casually, intensely, like a man silently losing a battle inside himself. "What?" she asked finally. Yu-jin looked away immediately. "Nothing." "You've been staring for 10 minutes." "No, I haven't." "Yu-jin." His jaw tightened slightly before he sighed. "You make peaceful things feel dangerous." Deborah blinked. That sentence barely makes sense. It makes perfect sense. He stood slowly and walked toward her until only a small distance remained between them. "You walk into rooms and somehow they stop feeling empty," he said quietly. "That's dangerous to someone like me." Deborah's heartbeat became uneven instantly. Someone like you. Someone who survives by staying detached. The air between them felt painfully intimate now. Deborah swallowed carefully. "You're not detached anymore." Yu-jin's eyes locked onto hers. "That's the problem." And before she could respond, his phone rang. The moment shattered instantly. Yu-jin stepped back, answering the call with immediate coldness returning to his expression. "Yes." Silence. Then his face hardened. "I'll handle it." He hung up and grabbed his coat immediately. "What happened?" Deborah asked. Yu-jin looked furious. "Someone leaked internal company documents to the press." "What kind of documents?" His eyes met hers briefly. "Information connected to you." Deborah's stomach dropped instantly. Within 2 hours, her entire world exploded. Blogs began posting accusations that Deborah manipulated Yu-jin romantically to gain career opportunities. Old photos from Nigeria were twisted into fake narratives. Articles called her a gold digger, a foreign opportunist, the woman controlling Korea's coldest billionaire. Deborah sat frozen inside her apartment reading comments that became more vicious every minute. She trapped him. She's using him for money. She planned this from the beginning. Her chest tightened painfully. She had worked her entire life to build her career honestly. Now strangers were reducing her to a stereotype. Her phone rang repeatedly. She ignored every call, except one. Yu-jin. She answered quietly. "Hello. I'm outside." Deborah frowned. "What?" "Open the door." When she opened it, Yu-jin immediately stepped inside, looking furious enough to destroy buildings. "Who leaked those stories?" she asked softly. "I'm finding out." Deborah shook her head tiredly. "No, you're going to destroy somebody." "Yes." The answer came too quickly. Yu-jin looked at her face carefully then, really carefully. And the anger inside him shifted instantly into something else. Pain. "You've been crying." Deborah looked away immediately. "I'm fine." "No, you're not. It's embarrassing." "What is?" "That people think I'm with you because of money." Yu-jin stared at her silently for several seconds. Then he asked quietly, "Why are you with me?" Deborah's breath caught. The question hit harder than she expected. Yu-jin stepped closer slowly. "Tell me the truth." His voice sounded almost vulnerable now, dangerously vulnerable. Deborah looked into his eyes and realized something terrifying. He genuinely didn't understand why anyone would choose him emotionally, not without money, not without power, not without status, because somewhere deep inside him, he still believed love was transactional. Deborah's chest hurt instantly. "I'm with you," she whispered softly, "because when you stop pretending to be cold, you're actually a good man." Yu-jin's expression cracked, just slightly, but enough. Deborah continued quietly, "You protect people. You care more than you admit. You carry guilt that doesn't belong to you. And honestly," she said with tears building in her eyes, "you look lonely all the time." Yu-jin looked completely still, like he forgot how to breathe. Nobody had ever described him that way before, not accurately, not gently. Deborah's voice trembled slightly. And the saddest part is, you think being loved is dangerous. The silence between them became unbearably emotional. Then Yu-jin suddenly touched her face carefully, like she might disappear. His thumb brushed beneath her eye slowly. "You shouldn't look at me this way," he whispered. "Why?" "Because I won't survive losing you." Deborah's heart nearly broke. "You haven't even allowed yourself to have me yet." That sentence destroyed whatever emotional control Yu-jin still had left. He kissed her instantly, not softly, not carefully, like a man starving for something he denied himself for years. Deborah grabbed his shirt immediately as emotions crashed violently between them. Everything about the kiss felt desperate, terrified, honest. Yu-jin pulled away first, breathing unevenly, and for the first time since meeting him, he looked emotionally exposed, completely exposed. "I tried not to want you," he admitted quietly. Deborah's eyes watered. "I know. I failed." A small emotional laugh escaped her. "Yes," she whispered, "you did." For the next few weeks, happiness terrified them both, because it felt real, too real. Yu-jin became possessive in quiet ways. He remembered everything Deborah mentioned casually, her favorite tea, her sleeping habits, the songs she listened to while editing. One night she fell asleep inside his penthouse while reviewing documentary footage. Yu-jin sat beside her for nearly an hour just watching her sleep peacefully. No manipulation, no ambition, no hidden agenda, just Deborah. And that frightened him more than business wars ever had, because now he finally had something he couldn't control emotionally. Then disaster came. Yu-jin's mother invited Deborah privately without his knowledge. The meeting took place inside an expensive restaurant overlooking the Han River. The older woman smiled politely, but her eyes felt sharp. "You're beautiful," she told Deborah calmly. "Intelligent, too." "Thank you. I understand why my son likes you." Deborah sensed the tension immediately. "But?" Yu-jin's mother folded her hands gracefully. "But my son destroys women he loves." Deborah's stomach tightened. "He's healing." "No," the woman replied quietly. "He's attaching." The difference mattered. "He becomes obsessive when emotionally vulnerable," she continued, "and eventually fear makes him cruel." Deborah frowned. "You make him sound dangerous." "He is dangerous." The older woman leaned slightly forward. "You think you're changing him because he smiles around you now?" Deborah stayed quiet. "My son begged his former fiancée not to travel the night she died," the woman whispered carefully. "Do you know what happened afterward?" Deborah's chest tightened. "He blamed himself." "He lost his mind," the woman corrected softly, "for nearly a year." The air suddenly felt heavier. "And if he loses you," she continued, "he'll destroy himself completely." Deborah left the restaurant emotionally shaken. That night she couldn't stop replaying Yu-jin's words. "I won't survive losing you." For the first time, she became afraid of how deeply he loved, and fear changes people, especially people already carrying emotional scars. A week later, Deborah received an offer to continue documentary work in London permanently, a career-changing opportunity, one she once dreamed about. But now it felt complicated, because accepting it meant leaving Yu-jin. When she finally told him, silence filled the penthouse immediately. "You're leaving." Deborah looked down. "It's a huge opportunity." Yu-jin stared at her quietly. "How long?" "I don't know." That answer visibly hurt him. "You said you weren't afraid of me," he said softly. "I'm not afraid of you." "Then why does this feel like goodbye?" Deborah's eyes filled slowly. "Because loving you feels heavy sometimes." Yu-jin's expression hardened instantly. There it was, the fear, the emotional panic. "You're leaving because of what my mother told you." Deborah looked shocked. "How did you—" "She interferes whenever I become emotionally attached." His voice became colder. "She thinks protecting me means isolating me." "That's not fair," Deborah whispered. No, Yu-jin replied quietly. What's unfair is realizing you're already preparing to leave me. The tension escalated instantly. I'm trying to think about my future. And what am I? He snapped suddenly. A temporary experience? Deborah looked hurt immediately. That's not what I meant. Then explain it to me. His voice echoed across the penthouse now, raw emotion spilling out uncontrollably. You walk into my life, destroy every wall I built for years, make me need you, he continued angrily. And now you're discussing another country like this means nothing? Deborah's tears finally fell. You think this is easy for me? Yu-jin looked devastated, and somehow that looked worse than anger ever could. I knew this would happen, he whispered bitterly. I knew loving someone would eventually become punishment. That's not fair. It's true. No, Deborah cried. You're just terrified. Silence crashed heavily between them. Yu-jin's breathing slowed slightly. Deborah wiped her tears angrily. You keep expecting abandonment, she whispered painfully. So eventually you create it yourself. That sentence hit him like a weapon, because deep down, he knew she was right. But instead of stopping her, his fear chose pride. Maybe you should take the London offer. Deborah looked at him like he'd just slapped her. Yu-jin's expression remained cold now, guarded again. If staying here feels difficult, he continued quietly, then leave. Deborah stared at him in disbelief. You don't mean that. Yes, I do. No, he didn't. But damaged people say cruel things when they feel powerless emotionally, and Yu-jin suddenly felt terrified of needing someone this much. Deborah nodded slowly through tears. Okay. That one word shattered him internally, but neither of them spoke again. 3 days later, Deborah left Seoul, and Yu-jin completely fell apart afterward. The company noticed first. He stopped attending meetings properly, stopped sleeping, stopped eating regularly again. The warmth Deborah brought disappeared instantly from his life, and suddenly the penthouse felt unbearable, empty. One night, his assistant found him sitting alone in darkness, staring at Deborah's forgotten headset on the table. You should call her, the assistant said carefully. Yu-jin laughed bitterly. She deserves better than someone who pushes her away. Then stop pushing. But pride and fear had already ruined everything, until the documentary premiered. The final scene appeared unexpectedly on screen during the international release event. Deborah had secretly left a recorded message inside the ending edit. Yu-jin froze when her voice filled the theater. People think cold people don't feel love deeply, Deborah's voice said softly through the speakers. But sometimes cold people love the deepest because it takes them longer to trust their hearts. Yu-jin stopped breathing. The audience watched silently as clips of him smiling around Deborah played across the screen. Not billionaire Yu-jin, just Yu-jin, human. Then Deborah's final words came. And maybe the saddest thing about people terrified of love is that they don't realize they deserve it too. Yu-jin's eyes filled instantly, right there in the theater, in public. He stood abruptly and walked out before anyone could stop him. For the first time in his life, the cold billionaire broke emotionally where people could see it. 20 hours later, global business reporters gathered for what was supposed to be Hanol Group's major international merger announcement. Cameras flashed everywhere as Yu-jin stepped onto the stage, but instead of discussing business, he looked directly into the cameras and said, I spent most of my life believing love weakens people. The room became confused immediately. Yu-jin's voice remained calm, but his eyes carried emotion now. Then I met a woman who made me realize fear was the real weakness. Reporters exchanged shocked looks. Somebody whispered, Oh my God. Yu-jin continued anyway. Deborah Adeyemi taught me something I should have learned years ago. His voice cracked slightly, and that alone nearly broke the internet. Being loved is not the same thing as being destroyed. Complete silence filled the conference hall. Then Yu-jin looked directly into the main camera, and for the first time in his life, the coldest billionaire in Korea begged, "Deborah, if you're watching this," he said softly, "come home." His eyes filled completely now. "I'm tired of pretending I can survive without you."